We're back and we're talking about the scandal that has the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers facing charges of racism. But this isn't the first time. Joining me now to talk about all of this is Gary Rhodes. He's a deputy city attorney in Santa Monica. He sued Donald Sterling for housing discrimination. Also, Paula Madison, the former owner of the LA Sparks of the NBA. And Steve Zirin, the sports editor of The Nation. Steve Stoute, founder of the marketing firm Translation and the author of The Tanning of America, How Hip-Hop Created a Culture That Rewrote the Rules of the New Economy. And then Michael McCann, a writer for Sports Illustrated and law professor at the University of New Hampshire. Isiah Thomas is back with us. Good evening to all of you. But I want to begin with Gary Rhodes. Gary, I want to start with you because you have your own experience with Donald Sterling. You filed suit against him for housing discrimination. Tell me what he was accused of. What did you accuse him of doing?
Well, in the winter of 2002, tenants and employees from a couple of his buildings were coming to us at the Housing Rights Center with this story that was going to be one of the largest and most unusual housing discrimination cases we had seen. Beginning with the employees, they told us that when Sterling had bought their building that they worked at, that he called a meeting and said several things. He said that he did not like black and Latino tenants, and that he wanted to rent only to Koreans because Koreans or Korean Americans would pay the rent and live in whatever conditions that Sterling gave them. And sure enough, the tenants reported that after that meeting, they started seeing signs of a pretty massive discrimination scheme. They were subjected, the African American and Latino tenants were subjected to sham inspections. And this thing even included one from Shelley Sterling herself, where she showed up at one of our tenants' doors claiming to be a health inspector.
And that you're talking about his wife?
His wife came to the door with an entourage and said that she was a health inspector. And the tenant was thinking like, well, the hell you are. I know who you are. You're Shelley Sterling. But he didn't say it. He got out a camera and videotaped her and got her to say again on tape that she was a health inspector.
The tenants are saying, it is reported that the tenant said that he said he doesn't like to rent to Hispanics because Hispanics, they hang out and they don't work, and he doesn't like to rent to blacks because blacks smell and they attract vermin.
Those are statements that we collected in our case. We didn't get those statements till a little later after we'd filed the case from other buildings. This was the first set of tenants that came to us.
Ultimately, what happened with your case?
Well, ultimately, the tenants got a great result for themselves and for the general public. A federal judge that reviewed the settlement said it was monetarily one of the largest of its kind, and that it had significant and wide-ranging benefits for all the other 5,000 households in Sterling's properties.
Mm-hmm. When you heard the comments this weekend, you were not surprised, I'm sure.
I was not surprised because I had heard all this before, and I just think I think that all these old cases are germane to what's happening with the NBA case, but at the same time, there's a vice versa here. I think this reflects back on that we should be giving at least as much scrutiny to his role in housing in LA, because he owns and manages thousands and thousands of people's homes, and that is for someone who's making statements like he has and who has been sued and should have learned the lessons time and time again. His role in housing in LA should be re-examined.
Gary Rhodes, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us here on CNN. I want to bring in now the rest of my experts. And tonight, joining me is Dave again. And Dave, to you first. What do you make of what he said? It's interesting to me because he's made a lot of money off of minorities, Hispanics, blacks, Koreans, whatever, tenants. But he doesn't treat them in a way that is fair. He doesn't seem to understand that.
Yeah, it's because he's a slumlord. I think you just said the definition of what a slumlord is. And if you apply that to his NBA career, you're talking about somebody who 30 years ago put $13 million on the table, just $3 million down, $10 million on layaway, and now he has a club that is worth between $800 million and $1 billion. And it's been done with the blood, sweat, and tears of African American players. And yet he has contempt for them. He speaks about them with what's been called a plantation mentality. And I think, Don, I mean, you spoke about this being a turning point kind of moment. I think it's only going to be a turning point moment if we realize that the efficacy of what are called respectability politics, this idea that if African Americans just don't wear baggy pants and wear good clothes, then somehow racism is going to go away, is a fiction, because institutionalized racism is alive and well in the United States, and that's what was caught on tape.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that has anything to do with Donald Sterling. Donald Sterling is just a jerk. He's just someone who
It's
just
bigger
doesn't.
than no, but he's a jerk who's been
understand that.
coddled. He's been a jerk who's been coddled by NBA owners for 3 decades. If Donald Sterling was the one caught on tape, and I'm sure what Isiah said is true, that he's never heard other owners say similar things, but that doesn't mean they did not abide this person being in their ranks for many years. And David Stern, the former commissioner, and the current owners, they have to answer for that.
Paula, you know, in a piece for CNN.com today, you wrote, Sterling, his reported racist thoughts are not unique. What is unusual is that the sentiments were made public. I had a similar comment in my Instagram today from Fresca 1908. It says, please discuss underlying issue of white-owned teams and coaches, black players, and the implications and history of such in the system of sports. Generally, I just would like for coverage that does not treat this as a surprising piece of news. I mean, do you think that many like you are not surprised by this?
Well, I think that, Don, many of us wouldn't be surprised. And I'm for the moment, I'm going to limit it to Donald Sterling, because I think he's got a legacy and a history of poor treatment, mistreatment, discrimination against people of color. Insofar as the league is concerned, I was a member of the Board of Governors and an owner of a WNBA team. And the WNBA is, in fact, a part of the NBA. And we're scrutinized. We're scrutinized when we step up to buy a team. We're scrutinized and interviewed, and our financial records are gone over. But once you get in the club, you're in the club. And I dare say that, you know, my club was a tiny part of the NBA club. The WNBA is just a very small portion of it. Mm-hmm. But in this case, when, you know, should I be surprised? Should any of us be surprised? I think that what I'm most surprised by is that somehow his true sentiments were expressed in a way that he was very boldly speaking about them, and he felt he was very boldly speaking about them to one person.
It was the most honest moment that you could have when you're speaking personally to someone like that. Steve, I want you to listen to more of the tape.
And nothing more to say.
And I took a picture with someone I admired.
Good.
And he happens to be black, and I'm sorry.
I think it's nice that you admire him. I know him well, and he should be admired. And I'm just saying that it's too bad you can't admire him privately and during your entire life, your whole life, admire him. Bring him here, feed him, him. I don't care. You can do anything. But don't put him on this event so the world has to see, so they have to call me. And don't bring him into my games, okay?
Steve, how does a man who is involved in the NBA, where black people for decades have been a critical part of the league's success, speak this way or even feel this way?
Well, the first thing you see that he was obviously threatened by the fact that his woman was taking a picture with another guy. There's a lot of that within his statement, on top of the fact that there's clear racism. You know, I want to talk about earlier sentiments where you want to bring it back to, you know, David Stern and the league, and they should have known this prior. I'm still appalled by the fact that the NAACP was going to give this guy a Lifetime Achievement Award knowing all this. I can't just look and say, okay, maybe David Stern knew, and not acknowledge that the fact that the NAACP absolutely knew of the history and felt that it was okay to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Everybody has access to Google. That is so shocking. What is so shocking to
everybody? I mean, look, man, you know, obviously the NAACP was, you know, he was donating money, giving them tickets or whatever he was doing, so they kind of overlooked the situation. But the fact of the matter is, now back to what Isiah said, is this is a moment in time where we could galvanize the efforts of the players, the African American community, the community at large. This is a big problem that can set us back many years if we just sit around and let this go away. So I'm excited to see what happens next, to see how we all come together and camaraderie and really get this guy to force him out the league, because I think that's what has to happen.
Well, I think it has to be beyond Donald Sterling. It's got to be bigger than that. We have to figure out where do we go? Where does the league go? Where does the nation go beyond Donald Sterling? Michael, let's talk about some of the legal aspects of this story. First, proving the authenticity of this tape. How hard or how easy will that be?
Well, Don, it will be somewhat difficult because the NBA, as far as we know, doesn't have the original recording. And without the original recording, it can be more difficult to authenticate. And a lot of people are going to say, well, it's clearly Donald Sterling. And maybe it is, but the NBA wants to be extra careful. Because if it turns out, for instance, that it's Donald Sterling, but the recording was somehow tampered or edited, that would be an issue for the NBA that Donald Sterling could later on use, potentially if this ends up in court. I don't think that's the case, but I think the NBA wants to be very cautious. And a lot of people have said, why hasn't Adam Silver taken action swiftly? Well, he's a lawyer, and he knows that the right thing to do is to get all the ducks in a row, make sure everything is right before he makes a decision on what the right disciplinary action will be.
Yeah, in the meantime, the Clippers are losing tens of millions of dollars, it appears, by the day, with almost a dozen advertisers, big advertisers, pulling their support. Stick around with me, everyone, because later in the show we're going to go live to Perth, where the search for Flight 370 is expanding. But when we come right back, were Donald Sterling's views an open secret? And why wasn't anything done about it and done sooner?